pause that real fast. Okay, we are live. Welcome to the Humane Mind Live, episode 135. Red versus blue, whereas the red represents the RNC and blue is the DNC. I couldn't come up with anything more. Like, oh, red versus blue, yay, it's a reference to a funny show. Funny, what was that, Maki, no, what's the name of that thing?
You mean from Halo?
Yeah, the Halo thing. What's that style of video called? There's a name for it, and I'm drawing a blank on it. Mech something. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what it was. But yeah, using the in-game characters to make content. There's a name for that, and I can't draw a blank on it at the moment. So the main thing I want to talk about is the RNC versus DNC, and this was supposed to be last Tuesday that we had this stream, but I was having health issues, and so we delayed it a week, and now I can try to remember what all I had planned. So the other topic I've got is Unlearn Liberty, which that's probably not a concern for most other people, but I thought it was a pretty big kick in the gut when I saw some of that stuff. Leftist cops is kind of a more that topic's a little back more towards the humorous side. Vote or don't, again, that's a little on the humorous side. Then I've got Candace 2.0. That's could have come up with a better title for that, but Panda expresses herself. Again, that's something that kind of might be a little more obscure and maybe is just interesting to me, but we'll see. Money can't buy knives. That one surprised me, and we'll talk about that if that probably doesn't make sense. Oh, and I thought I had a clever...
So I guess it'll have to be in context. So I have to wait till we get to that point.
Yeah. It's from the title, you probably can't figure out what that's actually about. Oh, and I just had Dinesh here. There was supposed to be something else to that, I guess, but I don't remember what the rest of the title was supposed to be. But I was kind of surprised on it. I'll just put films question mark because I remember the topic. I don't remember what title I had come up with that apparently did not save. And then a surprise clip at the end. So, yeah. So even though it's been 2 weeks, most of the stuff is from about a week ago. I didn't really see much going on this week, or I guess, because I was still adding stuff to this list up until Thursday. So nothing between Thursday and now, although there have been some updates, and maybe we'll mention them if I can remember them as we go through. But okay, so first, man, see, I got my camera and it's right in the way of my where my notepad is on my start. What is this called? Start menu. Right, the little thing at the bottom. Anyway. So I can't, anyway, it's hard for me to pull up my notes because my camera's
Brandon Strock is here
right
tonight.
So I don't know if you've seen this. This is, I think this was mentioned elsewhere, but this was the most succinct version of it. And so even though, okay, I guess we gotta cover the RNC kind of, so I talked a lot about the DNC and a lot of the cringe moments and some of the speeches and some of the stupidity that was going on there. And
yeah.
The RNC was much better done. There were a lot of speeches from people I did not expect. And actually, last week, or 2 weeks ago, when you weren't here, I talked about the first one of the RNC. Because I think I did it on the Tuesday, the week of the RNC. And so that was the Mr. Jones in me, because there was a Democratic politician. So he is still a Democrat, but he's a state politician. He's not in the House of Representatives or in the Senate, like the federal. He's a state legislature. But he was talking about, so he spoke at the Republican National Convention and kind of made it clear that there are a lot of Democrats who don't agree with all the crazy leftist stuff that's going on, and they can't get behind Joe Biden's platform because Kamala Harris is all on board with the crazy leftist stuff, and a lot of the DNC platform is all the insanity and so that was one of the more interesting speeches of the RNC. They also had Ann Dorn spoke at the RNC. I don't have a clip of that, but what struck me is that when she was speaking or directly after she spoke, like MSNBC or CNN or one of those immediately cut away from the RNC and they started talking about it. It's like, oh, well, Ann Dorn doesn't really represent, David Dorn's opinions, and we talked to his kids, and his kids said that David Dorn wouldn't approve or, wasn't a Republican and wouldn't approve of Trump as president and things along those lines. But these...
How would they know?
Well, the kids might be more Democratic or more liberal and that sort of stuff, so... Because it definitely seemed like Ann Dorn and David Dorn were more conservative in their values. But the problem I saw with that, and that I didn't see anybody else pointing out, is that nobody... MSNBC, CNN, not even Fox News reached out to Ann Dorn. None of the mainstream media reached out to have an interview with her. Steven Crowder was the first one to have an interview with her because nobody else had bothered to reach out to her before that. And it's like, so Steven Crowder is he's a YouTuber, it's a pretty big platform, but you would think Fox would have had her on first, would have reached out to her and be like, yeah, we'll pay for you to fly out or whatever, hook up. They didn't reach out to her. Nobody at the DNC reached out to her. Nobody in the Democratic Party, none of the mainstream leftists reached out to her. The RNC did reach out to her. And it's kind of like, how do you know what their perspective is if you never bothered to talk to them and you're simply trying to dismiss her entire speech, which was very, very impactful, an amazing support of it. Like, yeah, and this is an amazing testament of his character before he was shot and killed, and an amazing appeal to stop the insanity and a pretty big criticism against Black Lives Matter and against the leftist riots and all this. I was like, and their only resort was, oh yeah, his kids said that that David Dorn wouldn't approve of Trump and wouldn't speak at the RNC, and it's like, how you didn't talk to her?
Yeah,
you didn't even bother. I was so angry when I saw that. I'm like, yeah, I gotta talk about that a little bit, because I just heard them trying to dismiss her entirely, and I'm like, you did not even reach out to offer condolences for her loss. You completely swept the story under the rug, didn't say anything, and the only time you talk about it is to say, oh, well, his kids say that, he wouldn't have supported Trump.
Well, I mean, how old are his kids?
I don't know.
Middle age, right?
Some of them, I don't know if that was all of them, but there was people around Ann Dorn in the audience at the RNC. I'm assuming those were relatives. I don't know. I don't know if those were kids or if those were, maybe David Dorn's brothers and sisters. They looked like they were in, college age, but I don't know if those were her kids. So,
I mean, I'm thinking they're old enough where they're kind of out of the house. Wouldn't his wife have more of a better perspective on what he...
Yep.
They've been married for however many years since they were born. So, yeah, that's just an odd jump.
And that's the other thing. Even if David Dorn and Ann Dorn were both Democrats, the Democrats ignored them completely. And it was only conservatives and the Republicans that reached out to her. And it's like, that's... So as far as I know, she didn't make any kind of proclamation, oh, you got to vote Trump to stop this insanity. No, she was just saying this is destroying people's lives. This is terrible for the country. She didn't
Yeah.
make any, like, I wholeheartedly support Donald Trump and you guys need to vote. Nothing in her speech said that. She was just talking about her personal loss and how all of this is insane and how none of this is actually, um, none of this is benefiting the black community, and none of this is is achieving what the stated goal was. That was what her speech, the sentiment of it. As far as I know, she didn't mention, like, oh, you need to support Republicans, or, you know, if Biden gets in charge, he's going to ruin everything. No, she didn't say anything along those lines. She just is just talking about a condemnation of the riots that are going on, and how, you know, Black Lives Matter, and this ended up resulting in her husband's death.
Yep.
That's, yeah, it's ridiculous. There was also so there was a lot of family members of people who have lost people either due to the riots, or one of the stories was about a man who lost his daughter to a illegal immigrant who came into the country, was deported, came back in, and then what they assume is a hijacking gone wrong, had killed her in trying to take her vehicle. That's what they assume, because his actual motivation for killing her was kind of up in the air. The best they can figure, it was a carjacking gone wrong, and he lives in a Democratic city, and nothing was done about the investigation into her murder until Trump got in charge, and he was at the Operation Legend, or no, something Legend, right? I don't know what the name of the opera. It's been too long.
Either. I can't remember either.
Yeah, it was some initiative that Trump initiated, and then the FBI started looking into her case, and within a couple of weeks they found the man responsible for her death. And it's like they sat on this for months or years, and then the FBI, as soon as Donald Trump initiated something, this man was able to find his daughter's killer, and he spoke out on the RNC about it. One of the other stories was the parents of a woman who was overseas. I believe she was on missionary work and was abducted by Al Qaeda. And then the operation that went in to kill al-Baghdadi, they named the operation after her birthday. And so that was a pretty moving speech as well. And they were talking about how Trump, so their daughter, they don't know if she's alive or if she's still out there and maybe being held hostage somewhere else. They haven't found her. More than likely she is dead, but the people responsible for her abduction and her abuse, they are definitely dead. So it's kind of like a somewhat of a silver lining, but yeah.
Yep.
So I mean, there were a couple other speeches that were kind of like, wow, that was really good. But I mean, when I compared the speeches there to the speeches at the DNC, I mean, it's night and day.
Well, it's because the RNC, yeah, they were saying positive things that Trump's done, but their primary message was that America is better than that, has always been better than that, and trying to get back to its roots of basic freedoms, and steering away from the socialist idea.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of had a message where the DNC was just anti-Trump everything, just kind of hate Trump, orange man bad, the entire thing. Our whole platform is we need to get rid of Trump. That's our policy.
Yeah.
It's just
okay. So here's another thing. Well, the thing that when I saw it, I was like, yeah, there was a couple of speeches I wanted to touch on, but I didn't want to play the whole speeches. But the main difference that I saw was immediately after both conventions, because there was story after story, and I'm like, really? That I think speaks more to the difference between what happened at the RNC and the DNC. And that's why I've got this Tucker Carlson clip pulled up. So let's play that.
Joins us live. Thanks so much for coming on. Tell us what happened, where you were, and what these people said to you.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Tucker. So I was a guest last night at the White House for the close of the RNC convention to watch President Trump's speech. It was a magical evening. Everything was absolutely incredible, like something out of a storybook. I was there with a bunch of people from my organization, the Walk Away campaign. And as I was leaving with two people, Mike Harlow, who's a fellow gay man and conservative activist, and the ED of Walk Away, Libby Albert, we were exiting the convention along with a large group of people, and there was a small group of BLM hecklers there to harass people as they were walking out. The majority of the people exited and went to the right. The two friends of mine and I exited and we went to the left, which ended up being a big mistake. We were trying to get back to our hotel, and as we were walking back to our hotel, four of the people who were with the BLM mob that was harassing the majority of the people as they were leaving was walking down the street, crossing us as we were walking back to the hotel. And that's when they started hurling homophobic slurs at us, anti-gay slurs. And then they walked up to Mikey Harlow, spit in his face. They threw a drink at me, threw a cup in my face. And then they actually hit Libby Albert, the girl who was with me. They called us the anti-gay F word about 3 or 4 times, as you can see in that video. And I have to tell you, Tucker, I've endured anti-gay attacks like this actually dozens of times in my life. It's been probably 10 years at least since something like this happened. What made this one feel really, really different was that this time the attackers get to portray themselves as the victims. Back in the day when we would endure homophobic attacks, at least the people attacking didn't have the nerve to say that they were the victims.
So that is such a good point. So
yeah, yeah. So I'm not sure if you're, this is, so he mentioned it, so that he is the guy who started the Walk Away movement.
Yeah, I've seen him talking about it before.
Yeah, and he is still a very leftist Democrat. Not a supporter of the Democratic Party, but a lot of his views are Democratic policies, and that he supports Trump. And he started to realize, because a lot of the lies being spread about Trump, and he was on Tim Pool's podcast, the Timcast, talking about his his walk, what started it all, and how he changed his mind and all of that sort of thing. And so it sounds like he is still a Democrat on his policies, but he can't support anything the DNC does because it's a bunch of lies, and he knows better, and he can see, like, okay, this is what's really going on. And even though I don't know, it sounded like he didn't agree with Trump on a lot of policies, but he did agree that Trump is doing exactly what he said he was going to do, and all of the criticisms against Trump are based on lies and propaganda. And he's like, yeah, that shows you where your loyalties should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's like the people who are supposedly the moral good people are the ones hurling homophobic slurs at this guy and the other people that are around him. And like, what he said there at the end, they had the nerve to pretend that they're the victims. Because
because they're the ones slapping people, calling them names, being disrespectful. How?
Yeah.
But no, I think he's right. I haven't really heard that word in years. Like, nobody says that.
Yeah, like the last time. So the last time I heard that term being used, it was Milo Yiannopoulos. He wrote his, he called himself a dangerous. But he was using that word to kind of take the piss out of it, right? You're like, yeah, this word doesn't affect me. It's water off a duck's back. So he was referring to himself with that term. Like that.
Yep, I remember that.
Yeah. Other than that, it's kind of, the word is kind of, it's obscure.
Well, it's because, the instant someone would try and use that phrase, anybody around is going to look at them and say, what?
Yeah.
Some kind of massive bigot? It's just yeah, I would hate to compare it, and it's bad as saying the N word, but it's has the equivalency in the gay community.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
kind of like that.
yeah,
So
it is a pejorative in a similar vein.
yeah,
Although, yeah, so that's the thing. I don't get why the N word has this like, oh, this unsayable word. You can't say it for anybody. Well, unless you're black, and it's like, but everybody else can't possibly say this. But oh, the F word? No, you can say that regardless, even if you are, if you're not gay. It's like, wait, what? Why? Well, it's bad, but it's not as bad. And it's like, I think all pejoratives in general are bad.
yeah.
I don't get why the N word is supposedly but the N word is the worst of them all. It's like, what? I don't understand the logic there. And I actually like Louis C.K.'s bit on that. He was like, man, I hate the N word. And then he says, not, and then he uses the actual term, I hate the phrase, the N word, because you made me think it. Yeah, it's a pretty good bit. All right. No, I guess Louis C.K. is, he's got canceled culture too. Although what he did, I don't think is actually. It's kind of gross, but it's not like I can't believe he did that. He's so reprehensible. He should be outcast from society. And I'm like, he asked for consent and got consent. I don't.
They were fine with it, so I mean, whatever.
Yeah.
So let's start. Let's start here. Last night, as the RNC convention concluded, rioters and protesters again descended on DC, and they comported themselves about how you might expect them to. Here's a quick taste of the action.
Yeah, look at this guy yelling at a little old lady. And every time there's a beep, that's because they're cursing at it. It's like,
Yes, that was a guy flipping off, running up to and flipping off a small elderly woman as she tried to cross the street.
Skip ahead a little
Some
bit
of us.
here. This is Rand Paul. So, Ron Paul on leaving the RNC, man, this is the most bizarre thing, because I don't know if you heard him talking about the situation. So the people that surrounded them are Black Lives Matter activists, and they're attacking Rand Paul and his escort, and you can hear some of them chanting, "Say her name." And what they mean by "say her name" is that's talking about Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor is the woman, or was supposedly a girlfriend of a drug dealer. I've heard mixed stories on what's going on with that situation, whether she was involved in the drug ring or not. It's suspected. So, when I was looking into this, is what can be confirmed is that her name was on the warrant. They were there to arrest the main I forget his full name, but his last name was George. They were there to arrest Breonna Taylor or her former boyfriend, something George. Both names were on the warrant. As in, if you see either of these two people, you are to arrest them during these raids. The judge signed off on a no-knock raid. The officers claimed to have knocked, announced themselves as law enforcement, entered the apartment, and then were shot at, and it was only after they were shot at that they shot back and killed Breonna Taylor. Now, that's what I know for sure. the rest of the details, I hear one source say one thing, that she was involved, and even though that her current boyfriend was a drug dealer and was part of the drug rings, and others saying that he was completely innocent, and he, she hadn't been connected with this George guy for 2 years, sort of stuff. But Rand Paul had a bill that he introduced that would eliminate no-knock warrants, and it is named after Breonna Taylor. And these stupid rioters that are attacking him and would have done physical damage to Rand Paul if it wasn't for the police escort around him. Like, if that officer, they pushed him off the curb, and you can see him stumbling, and then Rand Paul puts his hand behind him and steadies him so he's back on his feet. Had that officer fallen down, do you think that they would have stopped and just like, oh, okay, get back on your feet, sir? No, they would have saw that as the opportunity to, like, okay, here's an opening, and they would have gone in and been violent, because has anything about these people's behavior said that, oh, yeah, there's no way they could possibly be violent? In what situation has it not turned to violence whenever they get an opportunity to break in and do stuff? If it wasn't for that police escort, they would have attacked the one guy who's like, yeah, I introduced legislation to ban on a federal level no-knock warrants. So that way no law enforcement could ever do a no-knock warrant. And it's named after Breonna Taylor, and there they are chanting, say her name. It's like...
So I'm wondering, do they know that about him? Like that he passed that piece of legislation? Or even after knowing that, are they just too stupid to know what it does?
My guess is they knew nothing about that. They probably didn't even know who Rand Paul was. They probably said that he, since he's got a police escort, oh, this must be somebody important in the RNC. And then they're just useful idiots that are just like, hey, just go in and then chant random nonsense and try to cause as much havoc as possible.
That's what I'm thinking.
Because based on what they chant and based on what they do, none of these people that are part of the Black Lives Matter protests know the facts, know the details, know any of the nuance. They just, these are the same people that are like, oh, this guy got shot in the back. All right, let's go burn down a city. And it's like, he got shot in the back while either reaching for a knife, and that seems to be the most plausible scenario, is reaching for a knife in his vehicle while telling cops that he had a knife, while they were there to arrest him for breaking a restraining order against a woman who he had sexually assaulted in the past.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, maybe this isn't the guy to go to bat for.
It's always been like that. Like BLM got really big after Michael Brown incident, and it turns out, he had just robbed a corner store.
Yep.
Don't do those crimes. Don't get yourself in trouble, and then you're okay. But at least back then they had some kind of plausible chance, or you could see kind of why maybe. But after years of this nonsense, yeah, I saw a video, what was it, 2 weeks ago, where they're walking through a residential area, and the only thing they're chanting is wake up, because it's midnight.
Yeah.
They decided to drive and blast horns and get on a bullhorn and just wake up. Like, that's not even a slogan. That's just because you're annoying people in a residential neighborhood. How does that support BLM or any sort of movement? And you're not even chanting anything related other than wake up.
Yeah.
They've gotten ridiculous.
Yeah. And so here's the other thing is, so Rand Paul also talked about this Trump mentioned a politician or some leader being on a plane flying to the RNC, and people were geared up in all black with the black masks, obviously there to protest. So they're being flown in to these protest sites. So,
Yeah.
and I think Rand Paul was that possibly that person on the flight, because he talked about that in another interview. He was like, yeah, these people are being flown in. They're staying at like $600 a night hotels. And it's like, they keep saying these are unorganized movements and these protests are like, grassroots and stuff like that. It's like, but who's paying for these plane tickets and these hotel stays? Because these people who are doing the rioting and protests, they don't have that kind of money.
Yeah.
To blow, $400 or $500, maybe $600 on a plane ticket, and then a $600 night at a hotel to stay there for one day so they can go and protest outside of the RNC. Who's got 12?
I'm thinking that these are dumb college kids, and they're getting recruited as if this is some sort of job. Probably half of them don't even know what they're yelling.
Yeah.
Because what was it, a couple months ago when the riots were first starting, they had video clips of just massive pallets of bricks. Someone dropped off beforehand, and then there's of people handing out bricks, to passersby. Hey, here, smash some windows. And one lady got mad, started cussing at him. And he's like, I'm sorry, man, sorry. I'll take it back. Why are you there? Who hired you? Obviously, you got planted there, and it's not you. It wasn't your idea. And so I'm thinking the same thing is still happening here. And maybe half the people yelling know what they're doing, or they're kind of brought in, but the other half that starts it or instigates it, it seems organized.
So I've heard, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, and Donald Trump have all mentioned something along the lines of investigating who is paying for these tickets and these hotel stays, because that is something the FBI can look into. So who knows if that'll actually go anywhere, but that
it should. This is borderline terrorist activity, domestic terrorism.
My guess is there's going to be, Soros's name is going to come up, and I'm thinking also potentially ties back to prominent members of the DNC. So, and that's the other crazy thing. That was a video clip that was circulating around when Kamala Harris was on Stephen Colbert's show. And she was saying, this is not going to end even after the election. And I was like, okay, that sounds like a warning. And she says, this is not going to stop, and it should not stop. And I was like, whoa, something just changed there into the, this is really bad. And because that's what originally it sounded like that was what she was saying. And then she says, and it should not stop. And I was like, wait a minute. She's encouraging this stuff?
Yeah.
And she's the VP. It's like, so I think that there's going to be some kind of tie with her to either the funding or, behind the scenes pulling strings on this. I mean, that may be incorrect, but that's what my my suspicion is that she is part of the funding behind these riots. But yeah, that was the main thing I saw. I was like, well, yeah, the DNC, I saw a huge separation of the message of the DNC, which is all negativity unless you go Biden. And what I saw mostly from the RNC was like, here's the tragedy, here's your tragic events, and then here's how things are getting better, or what Trump has done to actually do what the executive should do and use the position to its fullest effect in order to remedy these issues and prevent these from happening in the future. But what stood out to me more is the treatment. There, like, if you look at the DNC, where were the protests? Where were people getting shoved around? Where were people getting taunted and insulted? Where the protesters are all outside of the RNC. The protests go one way.
Oh, so I'm not sure if you were planning on bringing that up this evening, but there's been recent articles about some sort of war room discussion or think tank discussion.
Yeah.
where they said they tried to make it bipartisan. So they had people from DNC, people from RNC.
Yeah.
Uh, uh,
So I think what you're talking about is the one where Podesta was playing the role of Joe Biden, and it was
yes.
a war game. What would happen after the election? And
Yep.
Podesta, playing the role of Biden, said, "I feel like Joe wouldn't give up even if Trump won," and then refused to concede, and started trying to get states to cede from the union.
Yes, and they said they tested for most plausible scenarios, and the only way that violence would not erupt or a civil war wouldn't break out was if the Republicans backed off and Joe wins the election.
Yeah, that's absolute insanity.
If he doesn't win, that your side is the one causing the violence? Wouldn't that make that what they're explaining?
Yeah, that it sounds like that. I mean, man, at this point, if the DNC is not a terrorist organization, they're walking the thin line on that, because it's like what you just said is that you're threatening violence for a political agenda, which is terrorism. Like, either bow to us or we will be violent against you and cause a civil war.
Yeah, pretty much.
I was like, that meets the definition of terrorism. So either using violence or threatening to use violence for a political agenda. That's it's like, man, it's so bizarre.
Yeah, it is. And then you have like the other protest. What was it? One in Virginia a month or so ago about the gun laws.
Mm-hmm. That's where the people showed up and they were armed.
They were walking around with guns. They had their camouflage on. Nobody injured.
Yeah, nobody injured. Nothing was burned. And as with most conservative protests, they left the place better than when they arrived.
Yeah, picked up after themselves, and they're still calling that like a I don't know, I guess a far right extremist Nazi protest or something like.
Yeah. And they're like, "Oh, this was a threat against people because they're carrying arms in public," and it's like, they didn't use them in a threatening manner. You guys are just paranoid and stupid. And that's the other crazy thing. Okay, so there's the Rittenhouse situation, right? I don't know if I remember if I talked about that last time or not. The Kyle Rittenhouse, right? That's the guy who lives in Illinois but works in Minnesota because he's right on like the state border, but was asked to come in and help out protecting a friend's auto dealership in Kenosha. And while he's in Kenosha, he is armed and was attacked and shot a guy, and then was being chased by other members, and while fleeing from them, shot another guy. So he killed 2 people that night, and the third guy shot him in the arm to disarm him, and then turned himself into the police. Yeah. And the Democrats are like, "Well, why was this guy armed?" It's like, the other guy who he shot in the arm was also armed.
Yeah.
He had a weapon. It's like, why?
And he wasn't the only one.
Yeah.
Apparently, there was a shot fired from the mob, which is what kind of triggered the response from Rittenhouse.
Yes. He was not the first one to fire. Yeah.
Yeah. So
and also when he's on the ground and he shoots the first guy and kills him and then shoots the other guy in the arm, there are like 5 or 6 shots after that are around him just kind of randomly, and you're like, was that somebody shooting at him? Was that somebody just shooting randomly that was picked up by the cell phone? I mean, like, man. But the craziest part of this situation is that the mainstream media and Democrats are saying, "Oh, he went there armed looking for a fight," and it's like, well, what was the other guy doing with a weapon? Did he not also go there armed looking for a fight? They don't mention that at all. It's like either both sides showed up with weapons looking for a fight, right? Or maybe one showed up to defend, which seems more likely given the scenario and given the footage beforehand, because they've got footage of Kyle Rittenhouse offering his services as a medic, having some kind of medical training or at least knowing basic first aid and that sort of stuff, and offering medicals. And he's got a medical supply with him, a bag with him, and he's got the gun over his shoulder, and he's offering medical assistance to people who need it. And he offered one of the people that was injured was a Black Lives Matter protester, and there's video footage of him following her and saying, "Oh yeah, I'm a medic. Let me help out." And it's like, oh, but he was only there to kill people, and that's the craziest. Well, okay, there's more craziness to this, is they keep calling him a white supremacist when two guys that all three people that he shot were all white. So if he was a white supremacist that was going to these protests in order to shoot a black man, why did he only shoot three white guys? And that whole story gets crazier and crazy. Like, every part of this story sounds like it was scripted from a movie, or that even if it was scripted in a movie, you'd be like, okay, this is too far-fetched. You've broken my suspension of disbelief. I can't. Yeah, right. You're telling me he fired 8 total shots, and the 3 people who shot were all career criminals or had a rap sheet, and 2 of them were sex offenders, and 1 of them was a pedophile. And you're just like, dude, okay, who wrote this script? This is unbelievable. And you're like,
yeah, how am I supposed to sympathize with that side when it's terrible? What?
It's like, wait. You shot 3 people, killed 2 of them. 1 of the people who died is a pedophile, registered sex offender. The other guy is a sex offender. And then the 3rd guy has a criminal record. One of them involves carrying a firearm, or unlawful use of a firearm, and it's a felony. And so he shouldn't have a gun anymore. And it's like, what? The odds of shooting 3 people that all are... I mean,
yeah,
it's kind of like...
Either that crowd has a terrible population, like a majority has some kind of rap sheet, so
like,
he could have just fired at random and it hit.
The
because
only way Kyle Rittenhouse could have had the same success by shooting 3 random people is if he was going through a prison shooting random prisoners and was like, dude, I got 2 sex offenders and a gun violator who was carrying a firearm. It's like, outside of a prison, where are you gonna find a population that meets the criteria necessary to be like 3 for 3?
Who else was in that mob? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that situation is bizarre. And then there was almost immediately there was a counterbalance to that of a guy who shot a Trump supporter. I think I don't remember the dude's name. It's also, his last name ends in the R, like written. No, I don't remember the dude's name. It's kind of not important. Well, I mean, it's somewhat important. I don't remember the guy's name, but there's video footage of him saying, "We got him over here." And I think there was mention of him being a Trump supporter because the person was wearing a Patriot Prayer baseball hat or something along those lines. This guy pulls out a gun and shoots him point blank, then runs away, doesn't turn himself into the cops, does not say, "Hey, I was defending myself. I was fearing for my life. I shot some," because Kyle Rittenhouse turned himself in, had his hands raised up, and is like, "Yeah, I shot 2 people." And, was willing to work with officers. Turned himself in, got a lawyer, and actually, his lawyer is the same lawyer that worked with Nicholas Sandmann for that case. And he's working completely pro bono on Rittenhouse's case. So this other guy doesn't turn himself in, and in fact gets into a situation with the law enforcement officers that were there to arrest him, and ends up dying in the process. And it's like, And the whole time the media is condemning this Kyle Rittenhouse guy and praising this other guy as if he was just doing self-defense and is like, oh, he was completely warranted in what he was doing. It's like, and they're treating him like he was a victim because he was also killed by cops. And it's like, I'm pretty sure he was killed by cops because he was either going to shoot them back or he was resisting. I don't know the full details of it. But...
That's his name, Michael Reinhold?
Yeah.
Something like that?
Yeah, Reinhold, yeah.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
She's like, yep, I recognize him. Call the cops. That's my, I guess that's my brother who I haven't talked to in years. So apparently the guy was already.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was the thing that I think Tim Pool was talking about. This guy claimed to be prior military. There's no military record for him.
I think public issues.
Yeah.
Is looking at a lot of this and just, it's not believable anymore.
Yeah. And he was. Somebody interviewed him after the shooting and reported it to Vice. So I don't know if it was a Vice correspondent or if it was just, somebody who's like, yeah, let's release this to Vice. But Vice ended up printing the story. And he talks about being paranoid and fearful of his life because he saw vehicles around and he thought there was a bunch of people armed in the vehicles and he thought he was surrounded by Trump supporters. And it's like, you walked up to him. You walked up to the guy and shot him. If you were fearful of for your life, you don't walk towards the person to shoot them. You walk away or run away or get out of the situation. Like, man, the whole story doesn't.
I mean, I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was a phrase kind of like, "Hey, we got one over here" or something like that. Like, he's purposely tracking that dude down.
And also, if it wasn't self-defense, you're like, okay, I shot somebody, but I was fearful for my life. You turned yourself into the cops because that's what Rittenhouse did. Rittenhouse is still alive. This other guy, not alive. Ugh. Yeah, and the excuse that was written in the Vice piece was that, oh, he was fearful the cops were in for the Trump side. And I was like,
going around shooting people, then yeah, you probably should be a bit fearful. But if you comply, good chance you're going to be okay.
Yeah, was it San Bernardino, like the terrorists who were doing the active shooter, they were brought in, alive, right? Was it San Bernardino? Yeah, I don't remember if that was the exact, but there have been terrorists who went on shooting sprees who were brought in alive by the cops, and it's kind of like, wait, but if the cops are on the Trump side and they would shoot anybody, wouldn't they shoot those terrorists? I think it was a San Bernardino. I'll have to double check that. But it was one of those incidents where the shooters were detained and were not killed in the event.
Yeah, well, it's because the people who are getting shot and killed are resisting. They're threatening the officers' lives. They're either reaching for a weapon or have a weapon or, not complying. What else are the officers just supposed to stand there and get shot back?
Yeah, that's the thing.
It's just nonsense.
Yeah, I don't remember if it was that incident, but now it's gonna bug me. I know it was one of those incidents where all right, I'll have to look that up later. But I know that there were some terrorists who were taken in alive because they weren't actively resisting, and they were able to be detained without shooting or without firing back at cops and that sort of stuff. And that's usually where people die. It's because they're not obeying instructions or they're firing back at cops. Those are the main two things. Okay, here's something that it's kind of related, and I don't know if this quite goes to the RNC DNC thing, but this I heard this and was like, that is amazing, and I hope that more cities start adopting this.
Law and order emerging as a top issue in the 2020 election, and we are seeing more sports teams like the NFL's Tennessee Titans protest the officer-involved shooting of Jacob Blake. Against that backdrop, Tennessee passing a new law that could strip some protesters of their voting rights. Let's discuss the developments with GOP Senator from Tennessee, Marsha Blackburn. Welcome back, Senator.
Thank you.
Okay, speaking of protests, I want to play something from Kate Bedingfield, who is the managing director of the Biden campaign. This is what she says about this conversation about law and order and who can fix what.
Well, I would say there's a pretty fundamental flaw with Donald Trump trying to make the argument that people are not going to be safe in Joe Biden's America while pointing to things that are happening in Donald Trump's America.
So, Senator, how do you answer that argument?
She's missing the point. These incidences are happening in blue cities. This is a blue city mayor's problem. And the fact that they will not keep law and order in their cities is unbelievable. And whether you're talking about Seattle or Portland or Richmond, Virginia, people are just astounded that you do not have these mayors stepping up, supporting local law enforcement. If they need additional support, asking the governor to call in the National Guard. People want to make certain that their communities are safe, that their families are going to be safe. And Shannon, I have to tell you, yes, indeed, when I talk to women, security moms are what I'm beginning to call them, because safety, security, law, and order is becoming a #1 issue in this election cycle.
Okay, against that backdrop, a couple of laws. We want to talk about what has just been passed in Tennessee, but first I want to touch on one in Virginia. It's gone through the Senate there, allowing judges to consider lesser charges in assaults of police officers. The bill's sponsor, Senator Scott Surreville, Democrat from Fairfax, tried to defuse the debate by explaining what the bill would not do. It does not defund the police. It does not grant anyone the right to assault first responders. Instead, he said, the bill would remove a mandatory minimum 6-month jail sentence for assaulting a police officer.
Yeah, wait. Okay, so it's not going to give anybody the right to assault first responders, but there's just no punishment for doing it. Or there's a lesser punishment for doing it. It's like, what?
So
that is
why did we not have a mandatory minimum for assaulting an officer? When is that ever okay?
Well, it's not. That's why there's a mandatory minimum. And they're trying to get rid of that. And it's like, so you're going to give these guys, you attacked an officer, slap on the wrist, don't do that again, as if that is going to be an effective deterrent against assaulting an officer. It's like, man, mandatory minimum of 6 months is actually pretty lenient, considering that's putting the officers' lives in jeopardy. It's like, man, 6 months because you assaulted an officer. You would think that would be like, when an officer gives you instructions, you listen to it and you obey those instructions. And if you don't agree with the arrest or whatever the situation is, you fight that in court. You don't fight that when the cop is arresting you. But it's like, well, by the way, we're just going to remove that mandatory minimum, and you know what? If you shoot an officer while they're trying to arrest you, we'll just kind of treat that like a parking ticket.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is insane. But thankfully,
what do you make of that, Senator?
Yeah. What I make of that is that the Virginia Assembly is tone deaf to what is going on streets and the fears and concerns that citizens have. They want safe communities. And they're also tone deaf to the officers. In this environment, why would you choose to make a law enforcement officer's life more difficult? Why would you lessen a sentence? You have officers who are beginning to retire out. And their stated reason, they feel as if they just can't take it. They're concerned about their families. They're concerned what happens if they lose their life, if they become injured. And they're seeing footage every single day in cities across this country where you have anarchists and rioters and looters who have declared open season on cops. I saw footage today of someone throwing a hubcap at an officer's head. This is the type of thing that concerns citizens, and they're wanting the anarchy and the revolutionaries that are now on the streets. They want them to be dealt with. This is not the way to solve problems.
Yeah, quickly, I want to ask you about in Tennessee, they signed a law there, the governor has signed and passed. It's a felony to participate in some types of protests, and some people could lose their voting rights as a result of that. Senator Jeff Merkley tweeting on it saying, gathering to protest is a First Amendment right, and this law violates the most fundamental constitutional rights, and it's clearly voter suppression. So quickly, your take or explanation of the Tennessee law.
Well, I will leave this to the Tennessee General Assembly. My understanding is they took an existing law that prohibits camping on state property that is not a campground, and they made that a felony offense, and they did it because of damage to property and concerns for safety.
Yeah, so while they didn't make protests and riots and all of that outright a felony, a lot of these violent riots, they congregate in a centralized area before they disperse and go out and do their stuff. And because they were talking about this in Portland, where there was a park and they were all kind of camping out in the park waiting for it to turn dark, and then once it was dark, then they go around and they do their burning and looting and stuff like that. And so this is a law designed to kind of address that situation. Is well, if we make it illegal to congregate in these certain sections, then they can't meet up in order to wait for dark to do their violence, destruction. It's kind of a preventative measure, and it's that makes perfect sense. That kind of is well, you can no longer meet up before you go out and do your destruction. So if you go out and, I guess they could still try to disperse. Maybe they won't be as successful. We don't know. But that's at least trying to be a deterrent to that. And again, it's a felony, and if you are convicted of a felony, you lose your right to vote. And I was but I mean, so this sounds like, out of all the states and all the people, this sounds like, this is at least a step in the right direction. And I hope a lot of other states pick up on this. Oh, we should actually be instituting deterrents, not against protests, but against the assembling in order to destroy property and to attack people and set things on fire. That those are the things that should be deterred, and we got to put some kind of countermeasure in place to prevent that.
Yeah, well, it also seems ignorant that they say that's a fundamental right listed in the Bill of Rights, because it's not. You have the right to peaceably assemble, and that word peaceably is in the Constitution, meaning if it's not peaceful, then that's not allowed. That is not a right you have. How are they missing that? And it doesn't say mostly peaceably assemble, mostly peaceful protest.
Yeah.
So it's not a violation of anybody's constitutional rights.
Yeah, and there have been people lampooning the mostly one of the good ones I saw is somebody mentioned that the riots were 93% peaceful, and so the retaliation to that is yeah, the Titanic was 93% iceberg free.
Yeah.
93% of the trip they didn't crash into an iceberg. I think it was somebody else mentioned Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer didn't kill and eat most of the people he met. Yeah, so I think I mentioned that before as well. But I saw it in the comments on some of these posts. And then I think it was Michael Malice who was talking about that. And he says, yeah, if I kill somebody, it's hey, 364 days of this year, I didn't kill anybody. That's a pretty good record. But on that 365th day, I killed somebody. So that means I'm mostly not a murderer.
Yeah.
Man, it is the pure insanity. Oh, that was the other thing, was that chyron of the fiery but peaceful protest. That happened.
Yeah, well, that's where that phrase came from, I thought. The original guy who said that phrase was CNN.
Hmm?
Are you talking about on Fox?
No. So this was on CNN, and this was like the week of the RNC was the fiery but peaceful protest. While he's standing in front of a burning building, and it's like, what? Did they just fiery but peaceful? That, like, they kept saying mostly peaceful, and then they would show pictures of the regular protest demonstrations, and they would avoid showing footage of the actual riots and stuff like that. And there was while the guy was in Washington D.C., and there was an apartment building in the background. He's like, yeah, it's mostly peaceful here. Well, this more recent incident was the guy standing in front of a burning building, and the chyron says fiery but peaceful protest.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's absurd. Man, okay. Oh, there was also the crazy thing. Oh man, I didn't have that queued up, did I? Joe Biden's incoherent rambling about 100 years. Oh man, maybe I need to find that clip real fast. Hang on a second. Let me. So I saw somebody post a clip saying that Joe Biden had said that people were dying now who have never died before. That apparently was a joke, not something he actually said. And I looked that up, and it's like, well, it was previously attributed to Trump, people trolling and saying that Trump had said that. People are dying now who have never died before. And then, now it switched over and people are saying that Joe Biden had said that. But then this happened, and I'm like, dude, that's close to that being an actual clip, and it's a video clip of Joe Biden saying it. So, like, yeah, dude, this is a bizarre.
We can do better, and we have to do better. I promise you this, we will do better. The road back begins now.
Is this the clip? Oh, sorry, I'm watching a video clip on the other. Nope, this is not the right clip.
Leadership at a time.
Fellow Americans, about the spread of the COVID-19, known as the coronavirus. Livelihoods. I know people are worried. Those infected themselves on the line, already making sacrifice themselves. You're in contact with an infected person. This is going to.
All right, maybe it's not worth it.
COVID has taken this year.
Oh,
just since.
Okay, I found it. Dude, I don't know if you saw this or not, but this is ridiculous.
COVID has taken this year, just since the outbreak, it's taken more than 100 years. Look, here's the lives. When you think about it.
What? Think about what?
Think about what?
Like,
in 100 years.
As COVID this year has taken more than 100 years. What? Man, that's so ridiculous that is a real
COVID
thing.
has taken this year, just since the outbreak, it's taken more than 100 years. Look, here's the lives. When you think about it.
You just think about it. I mean, I sort of can kind of piece together what he was trying to say.
Yeah. I'm guessing he was trying to say something like, just this year alone, COVID has taken more lives than in the last 100 years. But that's in itself ridiculous. World War One,
Yeah.
World War Two, and that's not even 100 years ago. Vietnam, Desert Storm, 9/11, all these terrible things. So even if you assume maybe that's what he's talking about, it's still stupid. That's not even close.
Yeah, it's. I was like, well, he didn't say that people are dying now who have never died before, but that clip right there is pretty darn close. I was like, man, I cannot believe that is not. I mean, man, I can't believe that was not hounded on more than it. Like, it was brought up by conservatives. You know, it was on, everybody on the Daily Wire was talking about it. Everybody on Shapiro was talking about it. Dinesh Films was talking all the conservative people were talking about it.
Think about it.
But like, all of the leftists either didn't play that at all, or they try, like, well, this is what he was really saying, and they turn that into a paragraph that's actually coherent.
Because even if you think that's what he was really trying to say, it still makes no sense. So there's no saving it. So I think they're just trying to get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
Pretend it never happened.
Man. So bizarre. Okay, so that's, I think, all I have as far as the serious stuff, or the more serious stuff. Man, where's my mouse cursor? Okay. So, I guess this is somewhat serious, or at least for me. This was a huge disappointment for me. So, okay, there's a channel called Unlearn Liberty. It's still an active channel on YouTube. I found this channel about 7-ish years ago, maybe more. And there's so much that I learned about libertarianism and economics, and this kind of started my whole change in perspective. Because, I mean, I used to think I was a hardcore conservative Republican, and then the more and more I saw these videos, I'm like, oh yeah, Republicans are way off on economic policies. They're way off on their social regards, and a lot of the stuff that they preach is, kind of the rhino Republican, right? A lot of the stuff that they teach, I was like, well, that's actually counter to the original intent of the Constitution if you read the framers. And I was like, so they kind of started me on my political journey, and my, it's because of watching lectures from these professors and stuff like that I eventually found Milton Friedman, and then Ayn Rand, and then Murray Rothbard and Thomas Woods and Stefan Monalou and Thomas Sowell, and a lot of those thinkers, and actually started to sink my teeth in a lot of these economic and libertarian principles. So this channel was one of the main sources that started me on that whole down that rabbit hole. And so I'm going to play a short clip from this professor who, really good guy, Anthony Davies, and he presents these really or somewhat difficult concepts and does a really good job of making them simple and relatable, presenting graphs and explaining these concepts in really easy to digest ways, which is what a good teacher should do.
To understand what's going to be happening with the student loan bubble, it's useful to understand first what happened with the housing bubble. To understand what happened with the housing bubble, it's necessary to understand first how mortgage markets work. Let's take commercial banks. Commercial banks loan money to borrowers, some of them safe, some of them risky. The borrowers, in turn, sign mortgages, which they hand over to the bank, and the mortgages are pieces of paper that say that the borrowers promise to pay back this money they have borrowed over time, the interest plus the principal. Now, the commercial banks, who now have these mortgages, behind them sits large savers such as pension funds, reinsurance companies, other large entities with large amounts of savings. These entities save their money with investment banks. Investment banks, in turn, turn around and purchase mortgages from commercial banks. So the savings goes from the savers to the investment banks purchase the mortgages, the investment banks then combine these mortgages into what are called mortgage-backed securities. Mortgage-backed securities, roughly speaking, are to mortgages what a sheet of plywood is to wood chips. Wood chips come in various shapes and sizes, and because they're non-uniform, you can't do anything with them. But if you glue them together and press them into a uniform shape, you now have something that you can actually use to build and to create construction plans from. So this is what the...
All right, and so, I mean, yeah, so he does like college level lectures, but presents them in a kind of a more easy to understand way. And so I'm gonna head over to this one too.
Profit and...
I think this one has it, which is really... I think this is the one. Or I might be looking at the wrong. Oh, yeah, okay, so I think this is not the right lecture I thought. Not the lecture I thought it was. But there's one that has a really... where he talks about income disparity, and he breaks it down like, okay, this group of people, like, well, you talk about like the job or the unemployment, well, that's not, and he shows a graph and he's like, well, because he's comparing socialist programs versus individualist programs, and he's like, he breaks it down by state level. It's like, well, these states encourage individualists, they're mostly Republican-run cities, and these are the mostly socialist-run forms of government within the states. And he breaks it down, and he breaks it down by decade, and and he's presenting all of these different graphs. Does a really good job of walking it through and showing that on every possible metric, the states that have a more individualist perspective in their policies that are implemented, overall they do, like, the people there are better off economically, better off socially. It's kind of every conceivable metric to compare the two systems. The individualist style of government comes out ahead in every category. And I was like, yeah, that's a really good lecture. I mean, usually they're about 20-ish minutes long each. But here's one of their more recent ones. I guess this is not one of their more recent ones. So this is from September 3rd of 2019. And so a lot of their older videos are kind of along the lines of Anthony Davies types lectures. Usually an economic professor comes up and explains a concept in a kind of PragerU style-ish video. It's like explaining a difficult concept in kind of condensed format that's easy for anybody who doesn't have a master's degree in it to understand. But this video right here, Learn Liberty, I guess they were having funding issues or something like that. They disappeared, and they come back, and this is what their comeback video is. So it looks kind of like, oh, they're kind of revamping their style, making a little more edgy, a little more. But
you were formerly.
But this is this type of stuff they started producing. Hang on a second. Why did this? Sorry, little bit, and little not as organized as I would like to be. No, where was the other video that they had? this one. Man, this one made me angry. Okay, so these. Yeah, so I'm gonna play a little bit of these two videos. So they're like, yeah, they're supposed to be focusing on economics and philosophy and things like that.
Formerly a Marxist.
I was. I came at my free market, free society views from the left instead of from the right. So I was not ever a Randian, for example.
Sure. You know, I came in a lot of ways from the left, and most of my friends are on the left still.
Me too. I mean, I have lots of friends.
And there's a lot of allies, you know, on the left for trans people, clearly.
I know.
And I think that there's not, arguably, a lot of voices in the classical liberal side.
That's what's so annoying. On the blogs, if my name comes up in connection with something I've written or something, isn't that true? I mean, that's what
That's the...
I don't care about my career, my life, or my love, or my friendships.
Just that for me.
When you have equal dignity, you get equal inventiveness. You allow people to be explorers of new institutions, new economic institutions, and new economic innovations in a way that was forbidden in earlier times.
Yeah, that's incredible.
If you invented something, the Sultan would throw you off a cliff, which is inducive to...
At least we're getting to a place where we're more willing to encourage innovation and...
Yeah, absolutely, and that was crucial. There's a mistaken claim in my beloved former Marxism, or indeed in the blessed Adam Smith, that capital accumulation is the key to the modern world. No, it's not. It's innovation that's the key to the modern world. It's new ideas. And new ideas of gender identity, the rules of gender identity, or new idea. That is all part of this egalitarianism.
Wow.
Okay.
That doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't make any sense at all.
Like, a computer is a new invention that makes a lot of money.
Yeah.
Technology, different modes of transportation, better processes, but just saying we decided gender can be whatever you want, that's not innovation that makes any money.
No, it's not. It's not an innovation. It's not a change in anything. The other thing that I found so absurd by these claims is, okay, both of these people are trans individuals, and it's like, okay, you were born men and you identify as women. Then wouldn't you think that means that you think like a woman? Then any innovations that you would create would be the same innovations that a biological female would create. What did you add by transitioning? Nothing. You added nothing. It's like, well, okay, I can understand the concept that men think one way, women think another way. And so you can see innovations that women would create that men wouldn't consider. Or, the opposite. It's like, oh, well, men think this way, and then they come up with creations that would help in this and ever. And, well, yeah, a woman probably would never think about that because it wouldn't occur to them, or because, they're more, they're more concerned with, like, a general welfare or nurturing and things like that. And it's like, well, men are usually more logically driven and that sort of stuff. So women have invented things, and usually they are not the same type of inventions that men would usually come up with. But if you're a trans, all you did was move from one side to the other side. What could you bring to the table that would not be there otherwise? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's not like you transitioned into some brand new, well, I transitioned into this brand new thing that thinks completely different from men and women, and therefore I can come up with new innovations that neither men nor women could generate on their own. No, you didn't do that. You just jumped from one side to the other. It's like, what is being added to the situation? Nothing. You just, oh man, there's 3 videos on this transgender individual.
Yeah,
it's like
episode 3. So I don't know.
What does that have to do with economics? What does any of that? So the entire time they're talking about LGBT issues, and again, this is June stuff, it's like, so supposedly this individual, like the older of the two, is a renowned economic lecturer and something like that, teaches economics and stuff. But the entire series is dedicated to the transgender perspective as if it's some unique new thing. And it's like, what? Okay, you were born a man and now you identify as a woman. What new perspective does that add to the world? It's like, now I can see these new economic principles. No, you're saying the exact same economic principles that other libertarian-minded people would say. It's just you're trans. What does that... Who cares about the trans status? Show the actual ideas. And this whole series doesn't show any of the actual economic principles. I was so angry with that. And
I think it's just them sitting around kind of patting themselves on the back and saying, hey, today's a much better day to live for trans. And that, sure, I could see that part being okay, but that doesn't have anything to do with equal inventiveness or any sort of economic model. That's just...
Yeah. And there's a lot of things that both of them say during the interviews that are completely illogical. And it's like, but supposedly this woman, whatever they identify as, is a professor of logic. And it's like, dude, yeah, I can't take anything you say seriously because there's so many illogical statements. Like, it's not just saying that they're illogical because, it's a man who thinks he's a woman. No, I'm saying, like, wait, that is not a logical proposal of what you just, you took. It was a non sequitur argument, or it was the exact opposite. It was like, the fundamental principle of logic is the principle of non-contradiction, which is A cannot equal not A. It's like something can't equal nothing. -1 can't equal 1. Yes can't equal no. True can't equal false. And yet there are statements that are made through this interview that are the exact... It's like saying false equals... true equals not... what's a good way to say it? It's not saying false, but it's saying not true. And it's like, wait, what? Did they just say that? They just said true equals not true, but they didn't say not true. They gave some kind of, they basically hid what they were saying as like, oh, well, not necessarily true or something. And it's like, wait, what did I just hear? Did I just hear them break the fundamental principle of logic while proposing to be a professor of logic? Oh, so frustrated.
Yeah, actually, I think that is a new type of thought that people are claiming is kind of the next wave. It frees you from constraints. Yeah. Kind of like that 2 + 2 can equal 5.
Yeah. Oh,
man. I think it's that something is happening where they said, this is organized, this is structured, this is what logic used to be called. All we're doing is freely expressing ourselves and thinking outside the box, except for that logic doesn't confine, logic helps define.
Yeah. And it's very similar to the...
If you want, it's just, if you think nonsense, just believing or thinking that it's no longer nonsense doesn't change it. It's still nonsense.
Yeah. So it's kind of similar to them saying fiery but peaceful protests. And the way I was looking at these analogies, it's kind of like saying, well, I didn't say we should kill him. I just said we should cut his head off. And it's like, what? It's what they do is kind of the equivalent of that. Like, well, I didn't say that he should die or lose his life. I just think his head needs to be separated from his body. And it's like,
and if you die in the process, well, then that happens. But that's not what I said.
Yeah, it's kind of it's like they act as if what they said doesn't result in the conclusion or doesn't result in creating this. So what they try to do is like, well, this is a situation that would result in something being false. But because I ignore that it would lead to an inevitable conclusion of false, and I just say the setup for it, then I can say it's equal to true. It's like, what? So here's the other video that I saw.
80+ years, this could get me locked up in prison, but today I can sit here and enjoy it, so we're going to enjoy it.
This is the moment the story changed.
And just so you guys know, this is off the street cannabis. I refuse to buy weed from the legal system. I won't do it. I can't do it.
Why wouldn't somebody buy weed from the legal market?
Why don't I participate in the legal market? I do not agree with how the legal market was set up in the very beginning. From the word go, it was never set up to address who it used to harm and who it still harms to this day.
I quickly learned that simple word legalization.
Fast
that
forward a little bit here.
I got a call from Aaron Varney, and he was like, yo, you need to talk to my guy Tim. They want to do this thing about 420, but I think you can give them a perspective that's not being told, because I had just held a meeting at the same place that we filmed at with a bunch of different stakeholders that really are trying to make a difference in the social equity stakeholder, you know, in the in the social equity piece here in the state of Washington, and getting more inclusion and trying to right some of the wrongs of war on drugs, right?
Timestamp of when.
And that's where me and Aaron kind of stepped in because the conversation we had was fresh, and that's Aaron from Dockside. Tim calls me and hey, I want to have this, conversation about 420, and legalization was great to the Black community, and I was like, no, it's not. And he's like, well, I really want to keep it, in a positive light, and I'm like, well, I can't talk about that because that's not really happening. And he was like, well, wait, what do you mean? And then we had a great conversation. I think it was supposed to be like a 10-minute conversation that ended up being like a 45-minute conversation that led into the film, the way that the filming broke down, and when some of the questions and the way that it was shaped was a little different than it was coming in. And it was more around the idea that, 420 is great. Legalization is wonderful. It really, truly is. I think it's a great thing. And one is supposed to stop the stigma of what cannabis is as a plant to the community and the so-called deleterious effects to society, as Harry Anslinger painted it for over, almost 60 years. And so we started the conversation, based around, why
this might not be the right clip.
Why is there no Black inclusion into the legal market? And it was, that was over the phone. Excuse me. We had that conversation, and then when we got to the library, it was kind of like it organically became just this really great conversation that I'm actually was glad that was captured on film in the way it is, and then that I am fully in support of legalization, you guys. I think it's a great thing, but it did not address any of what it was supposed to address.
Yeah, that's the longer version of it. Sorry, that's why I couldn't.
So here we have, man, a
and people can come up with all the hyperbole.
For 420 this year, I set out to make a film.
So here we have, man, a
It starts off the same way he's talking about a blunt. That's why
For 420 this year, I set out to make a film about how awesome cannabis legal overwhelming system of oppression.
Talking about the war on drugs, what does that mean to you? Like when you hear the word war on drugs, what is that?
War on drugs is war on Black men. There's nobody in my era or age group that was not affected by the drug war. And I don't care if it was you sold drugs, you didn't sell drugs, and then you have a system going over to legalization. They should have addressed some of this, and it didn't. And then here we talk, and everybody wants to know, well, it was great for the Black community. Okay. Show me where.
With the discovery of CBD, the medical marijuana movement picked up steam. Countries like Canada and Portugal started to buck the US-backed international treaties. Even some US states began to defy the federal government.
Colorado and Washington state legalized recreational use of marijuana.
The 50-year-long battle for marijuana legalization, which started in the 60s, was coming to fruition. Activists and the counterculture movement would finally get the proof that they needed to show that the drug war was not only useless, but also harmful. Yet, at the same time, despite legalization, somehow the drug war continued.
Seems like
So they've got several different versions
war on drugs
of the
is war on Black men, hands down. They can mask it with coded words, just like in the Constitution. It doesn't mention slaves at all. It mentions property.
Sorry, I should have had that in the show notes, but man. Okay, so they're talking about the Breonna Taylor situation.
And my parents, I don't even think understood why most of my friends were coming over at the time. And it was to get away from what was happening in their homes with crack, with the police presence, with just the lack of stability, right? I mean, I'm watching massive depression play out in guys my age right now. Massive depression play out, and they're not addressing it. And there's no systems to address it. That's the other myth, right? Like, go see a therapist. Okay, what therapist? What therapist is trained in the effects of the war on drugs and trauma? What?
Wow. That.
So
Man.
why just not do drugs if it's causing all those problems?
Well, because he's talking about as if like, oh, we had no choice but to do drugs, and it's
That's
okay.
what it sounds like. There's no therapist, there's no anything, so all we have is drugs to rely on. But that's a silly argument.
This whole setup, like the whole 50-minute long thing, you're like, dude, this is filled with nothing but leftist talking points about, oh, we're just helpless victims. We had no choice in the matter. And it's like, I can understand when you were a teenager and you're involved in drugs and you're involved in gangs, okay. Then you go to prison or whatever and you've got a rap sheet and it's very hard to get a job. I can understand, okay, you made mistakes when you're younger. It's very hard to come back from that sort of argument. But he's not making that argument. He's like, oh, what therapist could possibly know about drug abuse? And I was like, any therapist? Because black people aren't the only ones who get involved with a drug overdose or drug addiction problem. I mean, what was it? The radio host, Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh had an opioid addiction. He went to a clinic and sought therapy about it. And it's like,
oh, on OxyContin or something like that.
OxyContin. Opioid based. Yeah, but so he was addicted to it, and he was.
Yep.
Jordan Peterson right now is dealing with some kind of chemical withdrawal. He's seeing a therapist of his own. It's like, oh, what therapist could possibly relate to or help somebody with the war on drugs or with a history of addiction? Or it's like, are you kidding?
Well, that's like saying, so alcohol is legal, and occasionally going out and having a drink, spending some time with your friends, hit up a bar on a weekend or something. Everyone's like, okay, that's fine. That's kind of what it's there for. But alcoholism is a terrible thing. Mm-hmm. It destroys your life, destroys your body, destroys your relationships. People lose their jobs, sink into a pit if they become super dependent on alcohol. So this is like a similar statement. Yeah. Not basically saying, hey, every once in a while it'll help you relax or whatever, but that they're constantly doing it and there's no help and they have no choice because they have to do it all the time.
Yeah.
To the point where they're, buying a bunch of drugs illegally or selling or get caught traffic or whatever. And now they're part of that war on drugs. That's just stupid.
Yeah, so the whole section here is stupid. It gets yeah. Okay, so they mentioned some statistics. Innocent black people are 12 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted of a drug crime. Okay, that seems okay. I have to double check that, but that does not seem too outlandish. Here's where you're like, wait a minute. Okay, while black people represent only 12.5% of drug users, they make up 29% of those arrested for drug offenses. You don't have to be a user to get arrested for a drug offense because sellers don't use drugs most of the time. The people who are involved in the selling of drugs do not get high on their own supply.
Yeah, they're in it for the money, not the drugs.
I was like, okay, that is a very... Oh man, that went by a little too fast. Oh man. Sorry. Use this instead. 2.5 times more likely to be pulled over and 5 times more likely to be searched. And if you look at the actual arrest records and the victim reports, oh, yeah, there's a correlation there. So a lot of these statistics they mention here, it's like 1 in every 1,000 black men is killed by police, and it's like, I am sure that this is factually correct, but it's not truthful because black men have more encounters with police officers, and most of those encounters, like the ones we see, were black men resisting arrest or fighting back against officers or were actively engaged in a crime where the officers were forced to react. So, I mean, the whole rest of the video is just these rapid-fire facts and statistics, and I'm like, when I first started watching Learn Liberty videos, it was specifically to counter facts like this, because they talked about, it's like, oh, this is too broad of a fact. You have to take in the whole narrative. It's like, well, why is this the case? And there was a breakdown of these, and there was lectures on this, and this is, like, I used to be highly against drugs in general. I'm like, oh, we can't legalize those. I was heavily in favor of prohibition. But it was through watching Learn Liberty videos and lectures and also other stuff. I was like, oh, yeah, this whole policy is counterintuitive, and if it didn't work for prohibition of alcohol, it's not going to work for the prohibition of narcotics. And it has all of these detrimental effects, which there's so many statistics about. And it's like, but this whole video undermines all that by focusing just on black men. And they're like, oh yeah, we wanted to bring about the devastation of the war on drugs, and it's focused on black. And it's like, but you bring up all of these facts out of context where you're not looking at why these might be the case. And there's so many things that are incorrect about the way that this is presented. And I was like, dude, if I wanted to hear a video like this, you can turn on any mainstream media. You can go to any leftist site and you'll get the same type of stuff.
Have you ever seen that Chris Rock video on how not to get in? What is that? I was just watching that last week, and I was like, dude, that is... I know it's supposed to be funny, but...
it's spot on.
It's super accurate. Like, just... what do you expect? If your cop pulls up and you're blasting F the police, I don't think they're going to like that and be as hospitable.
Yeah, it was funny because it was like, this is how most people, or most black people, react in these situations, and this is how they should react, and they wouldn't have a problem. That it was pointing out the absurdity of what people actually do versus what they should do. That's the whole basis of the skit. Yeah, and I was like, so I was watching, so like, after that video of the, hey, we're back and we're kind of more modernized and more, after that video, everything Learn Liberty did, all of their videos are terrible, full of leftist garbage. And I'm like, you're supposed to be libertarian. You're supposed to be like, okay, forget what the right says, forget what the left said. Let's focus on the truth and getting to the heart of these matters, talking about appeal to principle versus appeal to tradition, which is more, a lot of the conservative values is more appeal to tradition. And then as opposed to, progress for progress sake, which is a lot of leftist values. And it's like the libertarian view is supposed to be kind of like, okay, we're sticking to principles and we're applying them logically and consistently. And whenever we see an area where they're not being applied consistently, that's an area that needs to be addressed. And we try to be as consistent as possible, which is what attracted me to the ideology, which what attracted me to the various philosophers that are libertarian and various, professors and lecturers. But I saw these videos like last week, and I'm like, this is what Learn Liberty has become? Because you can't, I could not, this to me, if this was on Vice's channel, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I'd expect Vice to put out. If this was on Vox, like if Carlos Maza was the narrator of this video, I'd be like, yeah, that's a Vox video. But I'm like, this was the formerly Learn Liberty. Whatever they took over it and changed it, I was like, dude, this is might as well just be called HuffPo YouTube.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's considered pandering, that type of information, trying to get sympathy or empathy from supposed target audience.
Yeah, I don't know. It's so whenever they lost their funding or were having funding issues or whatever it was, and they did their fundraiser and then they came back as this, whatever it is now, it's not. It's the same name as what it used to be. It's almost entirely different content. And yeah, it's like, so. Man, so I was kind of like, man, I was subscribed to this channel for a while. There are so many of their. If you go back to like, 2013, any time before September 2019, you can still go to this channel and find some really good lectures. There's also, Brett Weinstein was in a couple of these where he's having kind of discussions with other, professors or philosophers and things like that. And so there's a whole history of these videos that go back before September of 2018. It was 2019. Yeah, September of 2019, that was the other video I had. You go back, before that, all the videos are kind of like, okay, these seem consistent, these are along the lines of the liberty. And then after that, everything changes, and I'm like, dude, this is SJW dogma. I could get this from MSNBC. I could get this from other sources, and it's almost indistinguishable. So
yeah.
So I was very much disappointed by that. Man, it is almost 9 o'clock. I gotta. Okay. So the rest of this stuff, I think, is all shorter topics. So I'll try to get through the rest of this a little faster, and hopefully I don't get copyright strikes on this next video clip. I don't think I will, because it is... Oh! They took it down. So I'm guessing the original... Whatever, I'm gonna add it in here anyway. Hopefully, yeah. This video will. I'll probably have to cut this out for when it actually streams. But this is the video I wanted to play, because PragerU had listed this and was like, yeah, this was a joke when it was released, and this has become what leftists for some reason think cops should do.
Freeze! Police! Hands up! Turn around slowly. Okay, buddy. Do not move a muscle.
Yeah, so typical reaction to what you should expect. Up.
Get your hands back up. No, raise them up. Hands up now. No, stop. I said no moving. Put your foot down. That's good.
Yeah.
No, easy does it. No, don't pick your other foot up. Put that down. Put your foot down. Put your foot down. There we go. No, do not pick the other one up. Put that one down. Put your foot down. No, not put them both down at the same. Okay, now you're just walking. Stop walking. Now. No walking. I want you to stop walking right now. Do not get near that car. Wait, get away from it. No, don't go near that car. Don't open that door. Do not open that door. Don't open it. Do not open the car door. Don't you open that door. Don't. Do not get in that car. Freeze. Your butt better not hit that seat. Okay, stay. Get out of there. Get out of the car right now. No, you don't. Don't you dare reach for that glove compartment. Don't reach for that glove compartment. Get away from the glove compartment. Get away from the glove compartment. Don't you open it. Do not grab that gun. Whatever you do, you better not grab that gun. You better not grab that gun. Do not pull that gun on me. Put that down. Don't you pull that gun on me. No, hey, put that down. Don't do it. Damn it. God damn it. Damn it. Not again.
Not again.
The only difference is in real life, instead of him just driving away, instead the officer would have got shot, and then he would have drove away. But that's, I mean, his face is like, what? Me? I can't, or what am I doing? I'm so, like, his facial expressions during the whole thing are so priceless, man.
Yeah, but he's trying to look innocent. It's like, my hands are still up. What else do you expect?
What am I doing wrong? And it's like he's not following any of the instructions the entire time. But that's what this was 7 years ago. They're like, oh, this is so absurd and stupid. And yet, that's where, like, I can't believe they didn't tase him. They didn't get him in a headlock and tase him, and then they shot him in the back. And it's like, but there's video footage where they did try to physically tackle him. He threw them off. They shot him with tasers. He was unaffected by the tasers. He then climbed into his vehicle, threatening that he was going to get a knife. And that's when they shot him in the back.
Yeah,
and
well,
a
I
knife
there
was
was
found on the floorboards.
There's a body cam footage like right before the shot where his hand's coming out and he had a knife. Like I saw some of the still pictures they took from it.
Mm-hmm.
So he was actually going in his car to grab a knife.
Yeah,
What are they supposed to do?
Like, well, apparently they're supposed to do what this officer did and just be like, well, you got me. All right, I guess you're just going to drive away or stab us. And like, oh, no, don't stab us. We're getting stabbed and we're dead. And then he drives away and gets away. That's... And then mainstream media and leftists are all like, yeah, that's how cops should behave. It's like, what? No, that was the joke is that would be absurd for cops to behave this way.
Yeah, that would make them extremely inadequate at doing their job. Meaning we shouldn't even be paying them if they can't detain somebody or if they can't
So
stop others from hurting one another or themselves. It's just...
So probably this section might get cut out afterwards because Comedy Central likes to copyright. And so I've had streams in the past where the stream was unavailable because a section of it was copyright or copyright claims. Well, thankfully YouTube has tools where you can just cut out the section of video. But yeah, it was... So for anybody who comes later, this is the Key and Peele sketch where he says, drop the gun. I just did a quick Google search. You can find it on other platforms and stuff like that. And I think actually Key and Peele, they have a YouTube channel where they show the old skits on there as well. So you could probably find
they've
it
been
that way.
posting older skits like one a week or something, or one every few days.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot more that are available now than there were just even a couple months ago.
Mm-hmm. All right. So this is something similar. Oh, so this is a clip from Demolition Man, and again, this is kind of leftist ideal cops. Let's get a little forward here.
Protect serve in place. 4 minutes, 15 seconds lapsed.
Maniac is imminent. Request advice.
With a firm tone of voice, demand Maniac lie down with hands behind back.
Simon Phoenix, lie down with your hands behind your back.
What's this? 6 of you. Such nice, tidy uniforms.
Oh, I'm so scared. What, you guys don't have sarcasm anymore? Maniac has responded with a scornful remark.
Approach and repeat ultimatum in an even firmer tone of voice. Add the words, or else.
Simon Phoenix, lie down on the ground, or else.
Yeah.
Or else what?
So this is a little more realistic in that, yeah, this is what you would expect to happen if you had cops that act the way leftists want cops to behave.
Yeah, it would be extremely ineffective.
Lucky number 7.
And they would get beat up in kind of slow motion by Wesley Snipes. I mean, it's not as slow as Steven Seagal, but...
We're police officers. We're not trained to handle this kind of violence.
See?
That's an awesome quote.
Yeah, we're not trained to handle this kind of violence, and that's 1993. And people understood the whole joke was that these cops were so, they've gotten used to a life without crime and all, that they're ill prepared for an actual criminal. And yet, as leftists are like, well, this is how cops should behave, as if everything is peaceful and as if no one is going to be violent towards them. Like,
But there are being violent.
We live in a world where this isn't the case. The imaginary future that leftists think happens, like the leftists think they live in the world of Demolition Man, where the 3 seashells and all that. But the whole comedy of the scene is that these cops are stupid for behaving in this way, for treating this criminal with the kid gloves that they use, and then he just tears him apart because he's a criminal. He doesn't regard their laws, and they do.
Yep.
Yeah. So those 2 scenes were brought up this week, and I was like, yeah, those are perfect representations of if leftists were training cops. This is how they would train their cops. They'd be just like Key's ineffective cop, and just like the cops who were ineffective in Demolition Man. All right. So, man, we're already at 9:03. Got a couple more video clips here to get to. So, but the rest of these are not requiring as much commentary.
Do you hate Donald Trump, but you also don't love Joe Biden? Do you think Republicans are racist? But Black Lives Matter seems a little racist too. Are you just not sure who to vote for? Boy, have I got a solution for you. Don't vote! We're constantly hearing that you need to vote in America. It's your patriotic duty, they say. But are you really that patriotic? Sure, you could educate yourself on the issues, watch political news 24 hours a day up into the election, but who has time for that? Why do all that? Stay at home.
Hey, I just got text from Elijah. It's election day.
I guess we should go vote.
But we almost beat this level.
What should we do? Don't vote.
Thanks, Mr. Reagan.
All right, there's more to the ad than that, but it's pretty good. Yeah.
Oh, that came out earlier today.
Yeah, I saw this today. I was like, oh, just added that to the show notes at the last minute here.
I mean, he's got a point. That's what I did in 2008 and 2012. Wait, is it? Yeah, 2008, 2012. I was like, nah, I don't really like anybody. Just not going to vote.
I mean, maybe I should play the whole clip, because there is a section where he talks about you're not informed on the issue and your vote cancels out my vote. And I am informed on the issue.
I mean, he's got a point.
Yeah. So I thought that was really good. So this is a pretty short clip, and so at the time when I saw this was the Tuesday I was planning on doing a stream, but was unable to. So this would have been more relevant then, but now it's kind of old news, and she's talked about this on other video clips as well. But
I was a girl on YouTube with a dream, an idea, a hope that maybe I could wake up the Black community into understanding that
founder Candace Owens.
I'm conservative because I believe in hard work, and I think it's lazy.
Democrat Party, everybody that was Black and disagreed, not to subscribe to
Are we such punks that we are so scared to try something different?
To view myself as a victim because of my heritage.
So does that mean she's having a baby in December?
Yeah, her due date is in December. Yeah, so she mentioned that on the Ben Shapiro show that she is pregnant. So her and her husband, they're going to have a child in December. So that was her way of announcing it. It was August 28th, which So that was okay. Yeah, that was that Tuesday. Yeah, that was the original Tuesday I was planning on doing this, but so yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's a little obscure way to announce a pregnancy, but it kind of fits her style. All right, and then this one. So I'm not sure if I mentioned this individual on these streams in the past, but I have talked about other content creators that are similar.
You don't need me to tell you things are a mess. Orange Man is destroying the galaxy and everything we rich liberals care about. We need leaders who will solve problems like sharks with lasers on their heads and rabies epidemic and leprechauns, not deny them. Leaders who will fight against systemic racism that I learned about from a video I watched made by other rich liberals from their Malibu mansions, and fight against inequality like, why are so many darker-skinned people poor and don't have mansions like mine? It has to be Trump's fault. And solving this starts by voting for someone who understands what's at stake. Someone who's building a team that shares our values, not the values of ignorant bigots in backward flyover country whose opinions shouldn't even count, because I forgot why, but I saw a Taylor Swift video about it and it made me cry.
Okay, let's skip a little bit ahead here.
Sporting goods stores all over the country sell boxes of pills that can cure pedophilia for good.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so... Okay, so I don't know if I've mentioned Cringe Panda before, but...
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, a couple months ago.
She's a member of Mark's Angels. Like, there's 3... And, you know, they're all kind of in their teens, like 14 to 16, somewhere in that age range. And so I was talking about, like, it's kind of interesting, you know, and I'm glad that Mark Dice is kind of shouting out these smaller YouTubers, helping them build their channels. This was the first video that I saw from Cringe Panda that does not appear to be a copy-paste of somebody else's content. That's, because I meant, like, I don't know, so this was a little bit more for me, because I've been kind of, like, I watch more YouTube videos or whatever, and so one of the main channels that I subscribe to is Barbara for You to See, now Barbara 2.0, and she came out with a video talking about Cringe Panda, kind of stalking her in a little bit of a creepy way, you know, kind of obsessing about her, taking, you know, making, you know, constructing outfits that are exactly like the outfits Barbara was wearing, having the same background, having the same, saying the same things. And it got to the point where it's like, okay, there's impersonating someone as an homage, and then there's basically copying everything they do, and it seemed like she had crossed that line. And people, I mean, so Barbara kind of made a video. It's like, yeah, this is over the line. Goes through a whole bunch of emails that she had sent her that are like, yeah, this is kind of creepy coming. I mean, I know that you're a fan, and but this is not cool, sort of thing. And then there was about a month where, you know, the Cringe Panda girl was kind of, and it seems like there's still a little bit of butthurt about that, you know, Barbara video in this. But it definitely seems like she's kind of like, okay, so instead of just copying Barbara's format or copying some other videos that she's seen, like, because one of the other videos she did was very much like a Soph video. I don't know if you've seen some of Soph's earlier videos. There was like video content in the background of people playing Counter-Strike variant. I don't know exactly what that is, but it's like, it looks like Counter-Strike, although they're kind of running along walls at various angles.
Is it like they're surfing or something?
Yeah, it almost looks like they're surfing across concrete or stuff like that. And then, yeah. So that's kind of Soph's earlier videos, and then Soph kind of started changing it up and started playing, you know, started changing up the video format, and it looks like Cringe Panda has kind of done the same thing here. And I don't know if this is somebody else's video format, but the entire, like, I was laughing through the entire video. It's 10 minutes long. It kind of feels like a Daily Show-esque video.
That's what it looks like, because, I mean, she's got the mug sitting there. That's...
Yeah.
So, kind of have to have a mug on your desk if you're doing a talk show.
Yeah, so it kind of seems like a talk show, but it's like, hey, here's a story, here's jokes, here, and this, like, as far from... with the exception of maybe Steven Crowder, nobody else does a show quite like this. And although Steven Crowder's show has actually changed since it's gone daily, their content is not, it's not in this same format. Like when they first started, it was kind of very similar to this format, but then they changed it up. Now it's kind of, they've got a bunch of other people in the studio and they all talk to each other and kind of have a little dialogue. But it's not so much, here's a headline, here's a joke about that headline, here's a headline, here's a joke. This format is what, I was like, this seems very fresh and original compared to other content creators that are out there. It's like, if this is what she can continually put out videos like this, like, that's your niche. You found it. Stop copying other people and do this because you're the only one doing this. And so much of her other stuff was, other people are doing this, let me do it exactly the same way and just slightly say things different. And it's like, man, that is, if you're seeing it for the first time, which a lot of these people are, they're like, they don't see it. But once you see the original and then you see her version, you're like, why does that exist? Why does the copy exist? And it's, and something younger people, and I looking at it as older, I'm like, yeah, I'm sure, I mean, I know we did this as kids, where we just blindly copied things that we thought were cool, and we did it exactly like the original, and it was inferior and annoying. Didn't realize it. We didn't realize it at the time, but as you know, as we get older, we're like, oh, that's what I was doing wrong. Yeah, you see, because you see your younger brothers or you see younger people doing it too, and you're like, ooh, was I like that? That's kind of the sentiment, and it seems like she's kind of, it's finally clicking for Cringe Panda, and it looks like she has found her own thing that makes her unique, which I'm like, yeah, once I saw this, I was like, dude, I hope more videos like this come out because, yeah, and again, cure pedophilia joke. I don't know if that joke is from somewhere else. It might be. But that's golden.
Yeah, that's pretty funny one.
Ryan Long also, dude, he came out with a new video today, or maybe yesterday, but you should check that one out as well. It's the morbidly obese photographer, dude. Yeah, so between I was like, yeah, I need more channels like that are just actual, like, jokes and not commentary with silly ad-libs thrown in, which that's kind of become more of what Crowder's video has become, or his show has become. It's kind of more, here's a news story, we'll talk about it, we'll dissect it, and it's not that punchy format, which I found this is that punchy format, and the Ryan Long's content, his is more like sketch-based comedy, but also he also does kind of that punchy comedy. He's like, yeah, here's the setup, here's the punchline, his setup, punchline, and I was like, that's what there doesn't seem to be an equivalent, like a right-wing version of that, and that seems like a void that needs to be filled, and I hope this is the start of that. Man, that's not right. Okay. So, yeah, hopefully I won't keep you here too long. The rest of this I should be able to wrap up in the next 15 minutes or so. Okay. So I have had a little more free time in the evenings, and while during one of those evenings, I decided to check to see what is on Amazon Prime, because I do have that subscription, and one of the first titles that came up was Knives Out, and I was like, okay, I'm going to hate this, but I'll at least give it a few minutes to try it out. I ended up watching the whole thing and was like, why did they market it the way they did? Because the way they marketed it, it seems like a very anti-Trump movie. And again, so the headline here, Knives Out, is an analogy for Donald Trump's America masquerading as a murder mystery comedy. I don't know what the hell this article headline is. What movie did they watch because they didn't watch the same film I did? And Jamie Lee Curtis and a couple of these other actors that are in the film, and as well as the director, Rian Johnson, when they're doing interviews and they're talking about the film, they said it was a critique of Donald Trump and of right-wing. And when I saw the film, I was like, okay, this is going to be heavy-handed, political, shoveled into a movie that's not going to fit. And I surprisingly didn't get that. The film,
I thought it was okay. I mean,
yeah,
it seemed
so
it seemed a little weird that they kind of revealed halfway through, like, what happened. But then the rest of the movie is trying to find out why it happened, I guess. So it is still a murder mystery, but not. So I know Ryan Johnson likes to try to do that whole subversion thing. And this one, I think he did quite a bit better than the Star Wars subversion.
Yeah.
But I don't get the commentary about America. I don't like what's the correlation in this. I didn't see anything like that.
Yeah, well, that's why I kind of avoided watching the movie. So, Ryan Johnson, the person, I'm not a fan of. I think he's a crazy leftist. But as a filmmaker, he's made some of my favorite films. Like, I don't know if you saw Brick with Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Oh, no, he did that one.
Yeah, that was the first thing that put him on my radar. I was like, oh, I gotta watch this guy's other works. Brick was phenomenal. It is a noir film set in a high school, and it shouldn't work, but it works so well.
Yeah, it took a while to get what was going on because they just talk so weird in that movie.
Oh yeah, the dialogue is amazing in it because it's.
It was supposed to sound, kind of like the old noir stuff where they're talking in, I don't know. It's kind of like always talking in analogies or metaphors or something rather than just stating a specific object or opinion or whatever that they're converting.
It's sort of like what Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrel and Snatch, where they're speaking the English language, but there's all kinds of there's jargon specific to what, like, because it's called the rhyme jive in Snatch, and and it was Brick had a kind of similar where they're using words to mean other things, but it's kind of like everybody in the scene understands what it is. I thought that was masterfully done, and again, it took a genre and kind of turned it on its head, brought something new, breathed new life into it. The other film, Looper, really good. It brought a new concept of time travel. I thought was really well done. And my favorite episode of Breaking Bad, he was the director behind that, The Fly. Yeah, that's it seems like it's kind of a filler episode in Breaking Bad, but that is the episode I remember the most out of that series, and that was directed by Ryan Johnson.
The Fly, is that where he's wondering how a fly got in the lab?
Yeah, and they spend the entire I don't know why, but that's the most memorable episode of the entire series, and that's like that was my favorite episode of Breaking Bad. So I watched all this guy's stuff. I haven't seen his Star Wars movie because, man. Yeah, so he did the Last Jedi, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I watched The Force Awakens and was very disappointed by that. That looked like a fanfic, but a poorly made fanfic, because I've seen fanfics on YouTube and stuff like that are done on, they don't have the investors and the funding because it's, they can't sell it, but fanfics have better story and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I was like, man, this seems like a fanfic that had a lot of money and had no substance behind it. Oh, it was so bad. But The Mandalorian is fantastic. Man, The Mandalorian is like actual Star Wars fan fiction. Like what if you would expect a fan of the series to actually make, whereas Star Wars The Force Awakens was like, hey, remember that scene from that other movie? Here it is again. Hey, remember that character from that? There it is, exactly as you remembered it. It's like, but The Mandalorian is like, okay, remember that scene from this? Okay, how cool would it be if that actually happened here? Or remember, it takes these elements that you liked about Star Wars and mixes them up into it so it's something new. And it took one of the first scenes of the series is where he enters a bar and he gets into a fight, shoots the door of the bar, and it closes on somebody and cuts him in half. And I was like, dude, there's all these incidents of these doors closing the Star Wars universe. That is cool. That is a unique new thing that makes perfect sense in this universe, because there's so many times where the doors close on somebody and they shut right before them, and it's like that's taking what exists in the universe and applying something new to it, and it's in the first couple of minutes of the series. And I'm like, dude, here you see all these familiar callbacks to various planets, and and it's like, man, that was a good Star Wars initiative. And again, I think I hope Jon Favreau is put in charge of any kind of new Star Wars properties going forward, because he actually understands it. Like he gets that what makes Star Wars good.
Well, because I think he's a big sci-fi nerd. That's the reason Iron Man did well, because he loved the original source and wanted to make something close, but kind of modernize it, add some things now that looking back may not have been in the comics or being part of the cheesy stuff. So I think he grew up loving Star Wars, but said that's great for 70s, but how could we also change it a bit with stuff we've learned from them in filmmaking or movie making? But you can tell he loves that source material.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm not sure about J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson, what they were each trying to do.
Yeah. So it definitely seemed like they said, okay, let's do the old stuff only bigger. Whereas Jon Favreau is like, let's do the old stuff take Star Wars universe and go, let's explore other things other than the Empire versus the Rebels. Let's go take... And The Mandalorian is definitely, you can get a very Westernish vibe. It reminds me a lot of Firefly, the series, which, again, was inspired by Star Wars. So it's a very, it's in the Star Wars universe, but it's a different narrative, exploring different parts of the galaxy, exploring different, different cultures, different things. And it's like, that's what people want to see. We don't want to see more of the same, only bigger. It's like, well, now we've got a planet size, and it's not just the size of a moon. It's a Death Star that isn't a planet. It's like
5 lasers.
Man, that was so brain dead. I don't know why they thought that was a good idea. And it's like, well, it's Darth Vader, only it's a new version of Darth Vader. And he's not somebody's father, he's somebody's son. No, why does this exist? So bad. There's so many poor decisions that went into The Force Awakens. I hear the Last Jedi is worse. So
it's way worse. When I first saw The Force Awakens, I was like, I got a bit of nostalgia feeling, and that wasn't too bad. But then the second viewing, I was like, this is exactly like the first movie. You're right. They just made things bigger, but this army comes out of nowhere, but they look exactly like the original. The rebels are still the rebels. I thought they won. What happened? They didn't explain any of it. So in a second viewing, then that's where I got the understanding. I think they just repeated A New Hope.
Almost copy paste A New Hope.
Yeah.
My biggest gripe with The Force Awakens, though, is the pilot guy who's like, the best fighter pilot of the Rebels. He died, but didn't die. He just magically comes back and like, how the?
Wait, when did he die?
They crashed, and the stormtrooper guy was still alive, and he made it out, and he's looking around, and he sees the guy's jacket, but it's nothing but debris and stuff around. It's like, okay, he ejected. He should have landed somewhere close to the plane, but he just disappears and then somehow made it back to the rebels and was able to fly. And I was like, what?
Oh, no, I thought that's because he got captured and he was being tortured. And then that Finn guy and him, both got...
No. Yeah, they both escape, and then their plane crashes into the desert, and that's why, that triggers the rest of it. That's where Finn meets up with Rey and stuff. But the pilot guy just disappears, and you're like...
I didn't even think about that.
Either he's dead, or he somehow was saved, but Finn wasn't saved. And I'm just like... But then you see him at the end of the film, and you're just like... What was the point of that? Like it just seemed like I granted they didn't show his dead body, but it's like, how would he survive that? And if he did survive that, why didn't he find Finn and Rey? Why did he just, nope, I'm just teleport to the rebel base and then I join them in the last fight? And he's like, what? How did he just magically show up there? So not only was it just seemed so far fetched, and I was like, it was so bizarre. Either Finn would have found his dead body, or it would have been taken under the sand. But how would he get saved, and how would he leave the planet? Because Rey and what's his face, the only way they left the planet is they got on the Millennium Falcon. This guy has no ship, he has nothing. How does he get back to the rebel base?
Yeah, that's true.
How does he get back to the rebel base before them? Because BB-8 knew the location of the rebels and directed them there as soon as they were done with, getting Han Solo on board with their mission. And they go there, immediately after that. And then what's-his-face doesn't show up till the end of the film. And just like, you break my brain. Because none of this, you don't follow your own consistency. Anyway, getting back to this film, I expected kind of more of the same because more of the same ineptitude that was shown in other stuff, and as no, I was pleasantly surprised to see this works great as a mystery comedy, murder mystery comedy. It brings something fresh to that, the whodunit genre, and it was really, really well done. All the actors were amazing. The only thing that I could think would be somewhat like, haha, those Trump, is because they kept referring to the kid as a Nazi troll. And I'm like...
Wait, the son? The younger guy?
Yeah, the younger son is they kept calling him a Nazi troll and claim he was, jerking off to Nazi pictures or something like that. It's like, yeah, but that doesn't mean that's what he's actually doing. That's what you guys are saying he's doing.
I figured he was just tweeting or something. I didn't even think about it. Didn't care.
Yeah. So I can see from the leftists being like, "Ooh, they're giving it to him. Yeah, there's Trump supporters. They're." And I was like, but they could just say he's a racist Nazi troll, and then he's just being a normal person, and like, yeah, you guys are dumb. There's nothing any of the characters say was overtly racist. So I'm like, where do you get that from? The thing that's kind of close is they can't. They keep saying. Oh man, I'm forgetting a character's name. I think it was Martha. The nurse. They kept saying she was from a different country. Every one of them says a different country. Uruguay, Paraguay, Panama, or they mention a bunch of different countries where they think she's from, and it's like, that doesn't mean they're racist. They just
means they're not paying enough attention to care.
Yeah, they're not paying enough attention to care. But But what the director, Rian Johnson, and what Jamie Lee Curtis, and also Chris Evans, when talking about this film, they all mentioned that these people were horrible and they're supposed to represent people who like Trump. And again, they talk about the whole border situation and coming in legally or not. And I was like, but all of them like the Hispanic character. All of them, they like her. Even though they try to get, I guess without giving too much away with the film, they try to manipulate her to get the money and that sort of thing. But at no point is there any animosity. And that's what I expect. I was like, okay, you've got a setup where you've got Trump supporters and you've got a Hispanic who may or may not be illegal or who has families that might be illegal, you would think they would be portraying as being vicious and violent and evil to her and just, completely...
Yeah, I didn't get that either. Because they treated her well. They all said she seemed like family to them. They were just obnoxious and arrogant.
Yeah.
They grew up and spoiled. So
I was like, okay, they are terrible people. They're spoiled, rotten kids that you would expect to have, who got everything they have from their father. I was like, okay, and what's the criticism of them? The criticism of them is not they're racist, because that seemed to be, the film actually seems to do a pretty decent job of portraying them as anti-racist. And I was like, okay, that... The other thing is the two leftist people, like the mom and the daughter there, they're also horrible people. Like, those are supposed to be the good moral liberalists, and I'm like, if the rest of the family is the deplorable Trump supporters, and then your two liberal characters, they're fighting for what's good, and it's like, but they're also terrible people. None of this family is redeemable.
She was stealing.
Yeah. All of these characters are terrible, and I'm like, okay, I don't have a problem with this because it's being even-handed. It's kind of presenting both sides of the argument. What's the problem? And yet, article after article is saying, oh, this is a huge dig at Trump supporters. And I'm like, that's why I didn't give the film a chance when it first came out, and I watched it later, and I'm like, dude, this is actually...
I didn't really think they would be Trump supporters. They seem like they... Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't really thinking political at all during the movie.
Exactly. So the only reason I was looking for the political stuff is because I saw all the stuff about it before it came out. Like, when I first saw the trailer, I was like, ooh, that looks really good. And I saw Ryan Johnson's name, and I'm like, okay, he's going back to his forte. And it's actually not forte, it's fort, but whatever. He's going back to his specialty. He's, putting a spin on an old genre that I like. And I'm like, okay, this could be really good. And then I started seeing, I was like, oh, it's all, political messages. And I'm like, oh, man, this is going to be a waste of time.
I think all these newspapers, they're just politicizing everything, like, to the extreme, where they have turned to, like, these weird Don Quixote type things.
Yeah. So I think the coverage and analysis of this from a lot of mainstream sources were like, I think they were putting a whole lot into the film that's not inherently in the film. So I thought it was fantastic, very well acted. The twist I was not expecting. I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That was actually really good. Wow, that was really well set up. Okay,
that's what I was thinking. I mean, they somewhat exposed what happened halfway through, but then you don't realize that you saw what happened without thinking about it till you got to the end. You're like, oh, now it all makes even more sense.
Yeah, so I mean, because I was like, oh, all this stuff is fitting together, and okay, there's no real mystery here. There's no real room for a twist, and yet there was room for a twist, and I was like, oh, very well done. Yeah, so.
Yep, you got me on that one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't think anything political. So that's why I was kind of just staring at the headline like, I don't get it.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a ton of leftists talking about how this film is great because it bashes Trump and it's anti-Trump, and I'm like, if you didn't know that beforehand and you just went and watching the film, you would walk away with no kind of political message.
That would be a stupid reason to watch a movie.
Yeah.
Because you think it's bashing a political side that you don't agree with.
Well, I think the film probably would have done a lot better had they not gone that, because I think there was a lot of people who were like, oh, dude, I'm not going to waste my time on this. Because I know I was watching a lot of people when they saw the trailer and and they're like, yep, not worth the time. It's leftist garbage trash. And I'm like, well, supposedly this did get, there is going to be a Knives Out 2, although that to me, like, that seemed like a worrisome thing. It might just be a completely different murder mystery just called Knives Out, and maybe there's enough, spin or twist. But if they try to make it an actual sequel, it's going to be terrible. Murder mysteries don't have sequels. But I mean, but as far as I know, this film didn't do all that well, even with its star-studded cast. I mean, it's got a great cast in it. I mean, I don't like their politics, but as far as acting goes, man, that was all right.
Yeah, they were very convincing in their roles.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the Dinesh thing. So this was kind of surprising. Announced last week.
You started this. We're gonna finish it.
These are good people. I've known Mr. Lucini for some time now.
You ever seen him exhibit extremist behaviors or attitudes?
The man's Muslim, so you enter his house without a warrant. Islamophobia.
Come with me. He's running a terrorist nerve center or recruitment website. Or am I just an Islamophobe?
He won't talk to me anymore. He knows what I saw in that room.
Well, what does that tell you? He is the one that said, go to Cairo, talk about the faith. You're not suspicious? I'm asking you, don't go.
I will call you.
It's gone viral in the Middle East.
That you're preaching to Muslims. Well, I was invited. Not by me, mate. Who's there?
Can you hear me?
He's caused an international incident.
He was kidnapped. This is terrorism.
You are in the middle of nowhere, and it's gonna stay that way. We agree?
You gotta get him out. They're working on it, right? The government.
Not a chance. The days of Entebbe are long over. As far as the law's concerned, you're dead and buried.
I can't give up on it.
He's here, your husband.
You're CIA, the two of you set him up.
You act as if nothing happened in Virginia. Try to get me arrested.
I'm not gonna play the full trailer, but at first I thought he was just shouting out this film because Jim Caviezel was in it and stuff like that. But Dinesh is actually an executive producer on this, and I'm like, man, I know he has had a lot of success with his documentaries, but it's definitely sounds like this looks like a very like a usually when you got conservative-ish movies, they're kind of meh. I mean, they as far as the video quality and the caliber of acting and stuff, it's under. It's like they get a bunch of kind of lower level actors that you wouldn't like, oh hey, that side character that you saw on that TV show, and they're in this. I mean, a lot of these. Granted, there's not like a Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt in this film, but Jim Caviezel has been he's starred in A-list things, and he's also was on that TV show Person of Interest for a while. So he's kinda, yeah. So these none of these people in this film are like no name kind of, they're not the actors that you're like, this guy looks familiar. What did I see them in? And was the other guy there, the actor who played Candyman and was the I don't know the actor's name.
I think it was in Death or the Mortician guy and the Final Destination stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was the Mortician in Final Destination, and so he's. I mean, granted, he's not a household name or anything like that because I don't remember the actor's name, but you're like, you can mention what he was in, whereas a lot of these other kind of like, this guy looks familiar. What was he in? And you got to go look at their IMDb, and you're like, oh, he was in that show, sort of thing. But at least these are kind of like, okay, I recognize that guy. Yeah, I recognize that actor. Recognize the one I'm kind of like that is the not Jim Caviezel character, but the other guy. I'm like, man, he looks familiar. I can't put my finger on what else I've seen him in. But I was like, man, this looks like a a decently made film, and it just seems kind of unexpected that it's actually from Dinesh and his film studio, or at least he's executive producer on the film. I'm like, man, that means.
What's the name of that one? It didn't say in the YouTube video description.
It's called Infidel. Yeah, I couldn't remember the name of the film. Yeah, but I mean, that looks pretty well done for a kind of non-mainstream film, and I'm like, man, okay, definitely worth checking out when it comes out. Yeah, and again, it says based on true events, or inspired by true events, I should say. So I don't know if it's how close to the actual events it is, but yeah, something that you definitely would not expect to see from Hollywood, and it's nice that we're actually starting to get, because that's what's sorely missing right now is a right-wing or conservative alternative to Hollywood. Most of the stuff that comes out like that is kind of the lower budget, or like the Christian.
At least something to balance out what's all coming out of Hollywood. Something to put a little bit of counterweight to it.
Yep. So hopefully that starts something, but we'll see. Man. So it is a little after 9. Ooh, it's 9:45. My bad. Is there anything else that you wanted to discuss? I mean, we got. We'll go to the full 10. Go till 10 o'clock just to. I mean, unless you just want to kind of end it here, because unless you got nothing else to add, then I'll just go ahead and play the ending clip. But
yeah, I think we've already talked about the majority of it, the RNC and everything like that. I have seen in the last day or two a couple of news reports that because Kamala Harris was picked for the VP nominee, that black support has actually dropped 30%.
Yeah, that's. Yeah, so the polls are showing, I think Trump's black support for Trump.
He's at like 45% approval.
Yeah, well, he's got like 45% approval overall, but his approval from blacks in general, last I heard, it was over 20%, which that is if that's accurate. Now, if that's the top of black vote support, then that doesn't quite mean anything, because it's like, oh well, less than 20%, Democrats still control that voting demographic. If it's more than if 20% is like the low end and its actual support is closer to 30 or 40%, that means that Trump is going to win and Democrats don't have a chance. That's because it's I don't remember. I've heard so many people talk about this. Is like, if a Republican was able to pull more than 20% of the black vote, they would win, and it wouldn't even be close. The problem in most elections is that Democrats have 90+% of the black vote, and it only takes a shift of about 10 to 20% of that. That's that's what 10 to 20% is still like several million votes, but it's like, yeah, that's a huge swing.
I think he's at 24% now. It was at 15.
Okay, 24%. Yeah, that's.
Oh.
If that is the high end, well, that means it can still dip to 15%, during the actual election, and then you're like, well, that's better than a lot of other Republicans have done in the past. Because I think even in 2016, Trump got 12%? No, he got 18%, I think, which was high for a Republican, but still not crossing that necessary threshold. But if it's close to like 25%, that is huge. That is a huge blow towards the Democrat stronghold. And the walkaway movement and the Blexit movement that Candace Owens was behind, those things all contribute to that. Yeah, and the pick of Kamala Harris as the VP, yeah, that definitely hurt Democrats with black demographic.
Yeah.
So, the other thing is all of these riots and burning cities and stuff like that. Who is that affecting the most? It's not affecting white liberals in California. It's mostly hurting, blacks and Hispanics that live in these communities, and they're losing their businesses, they're losing their places to shop, and a lot of them are coming around and like, yeah, we can't support the Democrats because Kamala Harris is like, yeah, they're not going to stop, and they shouldn't stop. And it's like, yeah, they shouldn't stop destroying my business and my home. Okay, lady. There's a lot of dissatisfaction with the Democratic Party, and it's causing a lot of people to wake up and walk away. Kind of tying everything back. Yeah, and it's showing in the polls because Biden did not get a bump from the DNC. Trump did get a bump from the RNC. So Trump was behind by in all the polls, and now he's pulling either even with Biden or ahead in the polls, which is if there is the secret Trump voters and all that stuff, like it's highly suspected, like the people who won't respond to the polls or won't say that they're voting for Trump in those polls.
Where they call that the silent majority.
Yeah, the silent majority. If that is at all a factor, and Biden and Trump are neck and neck, that pushes Trump ahead by a lot. So. Oh, and the other thing that was in the news, I didn't have a video clip, is the guy who set his boots on fire. But I'm sure that's everywhere else. Guy was trying to lob a Molotov cocktail at cops and set himself on fire. It's a pretty good clip.
Oh.
I'm trying to think of what else I might have missed or was kind of. No, the other thing was a lot of people were talking about Mulan, but not worth it. Not spending $30 to review that movie just to tell people how awful it is.
Yeah.
No, but Mandalorian is fantastic. I don't know if you've got Disney Plus, but I was like, for $7, Mandalorian by itself is worth that. If you only want to pay $7 for 1 month and then drop Disney Plus, I think it's worth it.
Do that. That's kind of what I did for Game of Thrones.
Yeah, Mandalorian is fantastic.
Okay, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, and season 2, they just announced that and started releasing some stuff on that. So season 2 might be coming out. So maybe just hold off on a Disney Plus subscription, wait till season 2, and then kind of binge season 1 and 2. I mean, it's only like 8 episodes a season, so it's not, not terribly long. But yeah, I think season 1 by itself is worth the $7 price tag of Disney Plus. Yeah, and I'm like, man, Disney, make more like this, not like the crap that you sent to theaters. Yeah. All right. So on that note, let's go to the ending clip here. Oh. This is awesome.
Well, that's not how moon physics works. Can't wait to hop on Twitter and bust this one wide open. God, I hope people keep forgetting about all the women who accused me of sexual assault.
Oh, man, that is brutal. It's so good. Yeah.
I wonder if that actually does go through as that.
I don't know, but man, yeah, Film Cow, you've seen Charlie the Unicorn, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the cartoon studio that's behind that, and possibly the greatest thing one of the greatest things on the internet, the Spatula Madness, and yeah, I saw that video clip, like, oh, really? Neil deGrasse, and I did not see that ending coming, and it was just like, all right, well done. Golf clap for that. Yeah, and they've been doing like streams on weekends where they just basically stream all of their, like they did a one that was all of the Charlie the Unicorn, Charlie Ted Unicron, and then was it Yanni and Cat? No, Yanni Kron and Cat, I think was the name of that. I forget the name of that. It's like they did all of the, and then they did another stream that was all the Spatula Madness stuff, or the kind, and then one that was all the extra stuff that like the Ghost House, and I don't think they've done a stream that was Detective Heart of America, but yeah, so they've been doing streams where they're just showing all of their video clips in loop, and it's kind of entertaining. And it's just like once you start watching it, you're surprised at how much content they actually have. You're like, dude, they've got hours of cartoons. I didn't realize, but yeah. Yeah. Professor Toothy's also pretty awesome. That's yeah, and supposedly they're making the conclusion to the Charlie the Unicorn series. But a lot of people are suspecting that it's just going to keep going and going, and they're just going to keep dragging out the story, and while claiming that it's the conclusion.
That's an old one, right? Isn't that from like when YouTube first came out? So one of the first viral clips.
Yeah. Yeah, Charlie the Unicorn, man. Yeah, that's like, I don't remember when the first one is, but that's like early 2000s.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they just keep coming out with new stuff for that. So they did a Kickstarter thing to fund, or a Kickstarter or GoFundMe or something like that. So they did a campaign to get funding for the animation, and so yeah. But a lot of people are suspecting that Charlie the Unicorn is just gonna keep going and going and just not ever actually wrap up, because like what could you actually conclude it with?
Yeah, I didn't think it was like super sequential. I thought it was just random stuff happening.
Yeah, it's just random stuff. Yeah, but I am bleeding banana blood. Blah. It's one of the greatest lines that they have, man. Anyway, yep, saw that clip and was like, yep, gotta throw that in there. All right. So it is almost 10 o'clock. Yeah, like 6 minutes till. So I'm gonna go ahead and end there. And thanks to anybody who ended up sticking with us for that. Yeah, I ended up talking way more on some of these other subjects than I had planned. Nobody was in the comments section.
Yeah, I didn't see anybody pop up.
So thanks to anybody who ended up joining me in this or watching this later. And hopefully Comedy Central doesn't do a copyright strike. But if they do, I'll just clip out that video. All right. And yeah, so hopefully we should be back on a regular schedule, and next Tuesday we should be able to stream and be fine. All right. See you next Tuesday.
Yep.